So, let's begin with new series. The series name is, What If Naruto Fall in Love with Mirko? This is second part of the series. I hope you have enjoyed the first part of the series, so do not wasting any time, let's start the video. How long has it been since I thought about love? The blonde stood at a street corner, under a lamppost with its single light on him, while watching couples walk by him, heading towards a nearby shrine to ring the bell. It wasn't that cold despite seeing his breath, along with the fact it wasn't snowing with some snow being nearby. He was dressed in a simple winter jacket and scarf once more despite not need it. Only 2 other times, once over 100 years ago, and a frown forms on his face. Must have been about over 30 years ago, Nana. His expression remained the same except his eyes narrowing as he recalled the user of One for All who he had met during one of UA's sports festivals he decided to go to. As he recalled her, he recalled the memories he wished he could forget. Hey, his eyes widen in surprise, not even realizing how close she was, and just turns his head as others passed, and that was when his eyes merely widened to find she was wearing a mixture of a kimono and a winter jacket over it. Kimono? Was the first thing he said, causing her eyes to widen. Why yeah, she glances away with a blush forming. It's New Year's and all, so why not get dressed for the occasion, am I right? Her words merely gained a dumbfounded expression that embarrassed her, making her feel out of place. And my mom gave me this when I told her I was having New Year's here. All he did was raise an eyebrow before he found himself getting shoved forwards by the girl who stood behind him, pushing him. Oh, shut up and get your ass moving. Fine, no need to push. With that, the two walked side by side towards the shrine up the steps while they spoke with other civilians walking past them, having their conversation, though some passing a glance at Naruto and Rumi who were talking. You don't seem the type to go to shrines? His question sparked an annoyed Rumi to grumble. Why does everyone keep saying that? Because you're the type that would beat a villain with the actual bell. Rumi's eyes widen and put on a thinking expression, causing Naruto to sweat. Don't, he quickly added, yet Rumi just smiles his way. Why? Her smile increases. Wouldn't be a bad weapon, yet he just shakes his head as the two stop in line now to offer their prayers. Because that's offensive and not made to send people into comas, yet in response, she just shrugs. Not my fault, she simply smiles with confidence. Villains shouldn't break the law and not expect to be punished. Her words smile caused him to look away. You should act more your age now, you're 20 now. This got a reaction as her gaze turns into a glare. Hey, don't expect that everyone will act the same as you. Besides, it's not like you need. She stops to see they had arrived in the front where the shrine bell was and was being rung. Turning, she looked to see Naruto had his eyes closed with his hands together. Immediately she quickly does the same and claps her hands together to offer a prayer. Surumi almost sang as she gave a long oh while walking next to Naruto with festivities all around then that the people were enjoying. What does your quirk do? This got a surprise from Naruto, whose eyes widen and looks at Rumi staring at him curiously. We spent so much time together, and you finally asked me that? His question caused her to blush and look away in embarrassment. Hey, it's not like I cared or anything. Rather not have some awkward silence. Besides, didn't care to begin with. She glances at him with eyes that showed not wanted but needed to know. Slightly confusing Naruto. Yet after all this time, I can't tell what your quirk is. Only that it can affect animals and those with quirks that have animal parts. As he heard that, she points at her ears twitching as she had earmuffs for her rabbit ears on. I see. To tell you, he stops abruptly and raises a hand. It's nature. As he spoke, her eyes widen as she watches a body fly down on his hand while he looks at her. It's not easy to explain, but I can take in what's called nature energy. Tapping into the planet itself, nature, and turning it into energy. He raises a finger. With this, I gain multiple abilities such as my main being. I can increase my power. The tails signify it, and the more I have the greater power I. He stops the moment he saw her eyes widen with shock, and it wasn't in an understanding way but realization, as if being hit by some kind of truth. This merely caused silence between the two as they stared at each other. Rumi, what she said next caused him to completely freeze, never once even expecting her to say such a thing. Kurama, that single name resulted in his eyes widening in shock as his mouth opened yet no words escaped, showing clear shock. Where how slowly he takes a step back while Rumi stared at him, taking in the truth. So it's true. He turns fast, about to leave before he felt a strong grip capture his wrist, and turns to see she was staring at him. Let's go somewhere quieter. Her words were calm along with her gaze, which he just stared at her before looking away. Rumi sat in silence at a table, within Naruto's house as she waited for the blonde to finish with the hot chocolate which he does, arriving with a single cup in hand that he places in front of her before he too sits down at the table. The silence was the only thing between them, both not sure what to say with Naruto more focused on one. How did you know? That question lingered in the air for a couple of seconds before she points past Naruto, whose eyes widen and turns his head, which he sees what it was, one of the pictures on the wall, the one that had a crack along with it, having shown a group wearing the same uniform of a camo shirt and jeans, the military photo that had a lookalike that appeared a little younger by a few years, sporting short red hair. It took me time trying to recall where I've seen that until yesterday. I saw the same picture. Her words took him by surprise. It was the same one as the one at a friend's house. Her grandfather was known as Garu. As she spoke, Naruto didn't utter a word as he knew who she was talking about. How much did you piece together? I've done my research into you after realizing that photo was from over 100 years ago, and that the fact you once told me it was an old military photo. Naruto looks away at his mistake. My friend also told me about the things your team did during the war. It was with this I looked into the old videos about the war itself, and the calamities that rise with it. Rumi watched as his body flinched at the last part. Despite him wearing a disguise, he had blonde spiky hair and his foxtails were the same color as yours. A deep silence came between them, Naruto visibly frowning while Rumi just stared at him. So you know the guy you started having feelings for turns out to be a 100-year-old mass-murdering monster. As he spoke that, he saw her eyes widen in surprise as her cheeks heat up and turn away. That obvious, huh? Only realized it at Ichiraku, when you asked me. Back then Rumi looks up to see he had the photo in his hands, surprising her. We've killed over millions in the war. To end it, we indiscriminately killed on both sides, labeling us as calamities in the process, and forcing the nations to instead attack us. As he spoke, he ran a hand across the picture frame. Leave. Naruto abruptly stood up as he heads towards the wall to put it back. It's pretty obvious you are conflicted. You're trying to use your feelings you have for me to try and be blind to the truth, but don't even try. The last person in your shoes, she chooses correctly and left upon finding out the truth, that I'm a monster in human flesh. After placing the photo on the wall, he looks down at his hands. To many they would look normal, but to his what he saw were his hands drenched in blood while having long, sharp fingers, nails that had flesh on them. Not to mention, during the war I lost myself and ended up killing the one person I cared for most. There's no telling when I may do the same to you. You and the others lived for over 100 years. This question surprised Naruto, who turns in confusion. Having expected her to leave already, yet she didn't move an inch away from where she sat, but instead just got up with her head bowed, in deep thought before looking up, meeting his gaze with determination as she slowly approached him. Alone, thinking about all you did in the past. Each step she took caused Naruto to take a step back, his eyes completely wide in disbelief. I'm not the type that would act out like this. But haven't you ever tried moving on? At this point, her words sparked a flash of memories of the choices he made, and grits his teeth as her words hit the nail in his heart, resorting to anger as his only outlet to what he was feeling. Move on, move on? A tail came from his back while his features became more beast-like. Glaring at Rumi, what makes you even think I can or have a right to move on? I not only killed the love of my life with my own hands, but I've massacred an untold amount of people with the foolish idea that was the best way at the time to end a war. I've done so, without a single tear, just as a monster should. Being stuck with slow aging along with my regeneration, I knew with these the only good thing I can do to atone is watch over humanity, making sure the other calamities stay in check. Naruto looks away as he showed a complicated expression as he closed his eyes, just wanting her to leave. That's my entire reason for why I'm still here, nothing else. He froze as a hand rested on his cheek, the hand forcing his head to turn and meet her gaze to see Rumi's eyes as ones filled with sadness and fear, but not the kind that made her afraid of him. So you're using the excuse of being a 100-year-old monster, someone who's killed so many, now just a mere guardian, as a means to try to avoid finding happiness again? At this point, the expression she showed him was anger for the first time. That took him by shock. Think of this, what would you call someone that accepts you and everything you've done? At this point, his eyes could no longer widen as he just stared at her. Someone who didn't let the past decide for them but instead the actions of the present. Someone who didn't let what you did in the war change. You must be out of your mind. You can't possibly still think anything could work out with my being involved. Your feelings will only cause you pain in the end. It just can't. He jolts upon her second hand touching his face, making him realize she had grasped his face in her hands. You did so many terrible things during the war, but even so, you standing before me is the true you, the one I've spent months with and grown to. Naruto's vision began to get a little blurry at this point as he felt his emotions rising, her words hitting a part of him he had all but not touched in over 100 years. If someone like me accepts you, then that would also make me a monster for doing such a thing, ignoring all you've done just for my happiness. I don't care. After all, I can't stop these damn feelings welling up inside me, as if they're about to burst. As she spoke, Naruto could only think about all the sins he committed as a means to stop himself from hearing her, trying to deny true happiness, but it was useless. After all, Naruto, she showed a bright smile. I love ya. At that point, he finally realized it. He had tears coming out of his eyes, feeling the streaks of tears coming down his face as he was pulled in as their lips met. His eyes could only stare at her closed ones. It's been over 100 years since someone told me they loved me. Slowly, for the first time in over 100 years, I let his guard down as his arms wrapped around Rumi to pull her in closer. This sight gained just shock from all the animals that watched, mostly through the window as they spied. What they felt was happiness at seeing this sight, their master for once in their lives being displayed affection and returning it. In that instant, the two heard explosions and immediately separated, startled by the sounds as they both turned to see fireworks in the distance. Outside the window, both just look at each other and laugh. Flashback / inside Nabu Island's hospital. Damn, he's strong, broken as fuck, more like the power to change the plot. Slowly a pair of eyes open, being hit by a bright light that caused him to flinch and close them until he heard his voice. Wow. Ichigo's Bankai lasted only a single page at this point. Katsuki's eyes shot open as he sat up fast to see Naruto sitting in a chair, reading manga. Bleach, finally awake? Was the question he asked while closing the book, and at this point, Katsuki had realized he was in a hospital room. You got quite the number of injuries, so I decided to take you to the hospital to get patched up. He places the book on the nightstand. You've been out since yesterday. It's the morning and the sun is already rising. His words shocked the student, who grits his teeth while looking down with Naruto staring at him passively. I take it you didn't like the ass kicking? That got a response. Turning, he glared at Naruto. Shut the hell you. He was stopped by Naruto quickly grabbing his book and bonking him on the head. No yelling. This is a hospital, and besides, you lost the fight. Katsuki grits his teeth. Meaning you have to listen to me until you leave this island. His words caused the student to turn away. There's no way in hell I'll deal with that Satan cat anymore. His words caused Naruto to smirk while placing the book back on the stand. Understood. Now I have a question before you. Between the two pauses, the expression he displayed was more serious. That took him by surprise. Does Water Stream Rock's smashing fist ring any bells? The question floated through Katsuki's head, yet despite it being familiar, he couldn't tell where yet without a quick enough answer. The man looks away with a TCH sound leaving his lips. The hell was the TCH for, you bastard? Katsuki glares at Naruto. Got something to say? The fellow blonde simply sighs, scratching his head on where to begin. Her just looks at the young man with annoyance. I do have something to say. At this, Naruto points at the hero to be. You lack the legacy of your family. This got a response, causing his eyes to widen in actual confusion before Naruto continues once more. I'm referring to the martial arts style Water Stream Rock smashing fist. It's supposed to be your inheritance. But it seems you weren't taught the art by your mother. This caught him by surprise. What the hag? Katsuki stops as his eyes widen as he recalled something and goes into thought. Now that you mention it, I recall something about that. So the man leans forwards. Care to elaborate then, on what you recall? His words caused Katsuki to look away, still not happy about losing, yet even so he spoke. Look, I can't recall it fully, just something the hag was fighting with the old hag about on the phone after. He stops with Naruto's eyes narrowing. After the incident where you got kidnapped, correct? His words caused Katsuki to grit his teeth, yet even so he pressed on. How is your mom's relationship with your grandma, by the way? This took him by surprise, yet even so he answered. Shit, they never got along, and whenever I do see her, the hag's always with me. Upon hearing this, Naruto places a hand on his chin just as Katsuki spoke. What is this martial arts style Water Stream Rock smashing fist? His question got an answer almost immediately. It's a martial arts style your great-grandfather, Gary, used during. He stops the moment he saw Katsuki's eyes widen in the same way as Rumi's did all those years ago when she figured it out. This kid, Katsuki finally placed where he recognized Naruto, recalling the memory he had before he was knocked out. His eyes merely widen as he was now on edge with Naruto staring at him before a smile breaks out. So, you've finally realized it, huh? No, it can't be. You have to be his great-grandson or something, yet the way you speak. Yes, besides the hair color and eyes, that is indeed me at this point. He raises his legs and rests them on the bed Katsuki sat on. You just have a lot of questions to ask someone as old as me. How is that even possible? No one ever lived. He was cut off by Naruto raising a finger. This world has quirks like no other. Besides, I'm not the only one who's lived beyond the normal age. Hell, you've met one of them, recall All For One. Now that got a reaction as Katsuki recalled everything of the villain that ruined All Might's days as a hero. You knew him? The student points at him. Who are you really? One of his underlings you're trying to. He froze at this point at seeing all the amusement die in Naruto's eyes. Don't make me laugh, kid. Back then Hisashi was just a member of our military squad. Unlike now, he was much more shy and nervous, basically nothing like he is now. After saying that, Katsuki was still on edge on just who this man was, being All For One's old military squad member. Being over 100 years old, to him it had to be fake, yet his eyes told a different story. Izuku Midoriya. The sudden name caused Katsuki's to enter a state of clear shock. If I'm correct, he holds one for all. Immediately he saw Katsuki jumping out of bed, entering fighting stance with his hands drawn back. How do you know that? He demands, gained an eye raise before he places a hand on his chin. It could be the fact I once had a close relationship with All Might's predecessor, Nana Shimura. After all, Izuku has a distinct smell close to hers, most likely an effective one for all transfers. As he spoke that, he stared into Katsuki's eyes before he said something that pissed him off. The reason I bring him up is rather simple. I know very much that guy too have a rivalry, so what I'm about to tell you will give you the insight of someone who's been through many battles. You see, his gaze and Toke took on that of seriousness once more. You will never truly beat Izuku as you are. Like a nail hitting its mark, Katsuki grits his teeth, and small explosions appeared at his hands. The fuck did you just say, you whiskered bastard? At this point, Naruto stood up to look down on Katsuki. What I speak of is the truth, boy. Katsuki grits his teeth. In the end, you thought too highly of yourself, not realizing there is a fine gap you have no hope of conquering between you two. When Izuku masters that quirk, you will have no hope of surpassing him. At that, Katsuki glared with hate at the man who he runs towards and grabs his shirt to pull him down more toward his face. Like you would know, his eyes burned with rage. You know nothing about me. He was silenced in an instant, meeting the glowing eyes of Naruto, and with it, he finally got a look at what was before him. He felt as if he lay in the den of a massive beast, as if he were an ant looking at a giant, which reduced him to being frozen. I know everything. In the end, that explosion quirk will get you so far. Naruto taps Katsuki's chest. Look at yourself. I didn't even rely on my quirk yet. In the end, look at you. Your body, in the end, is a simple human with no superhuman physical properties. Unlike All Might and Izuku, just a single full-powered strike from them would kill you with ease. So face the fact. Being born with a quirk like yours doesn't make you even remotely gifted, because in the end there is the gap of physical properties. Not to mention, in your case, there is a bigger issue. He pulled his hand away and walks towards the window to look at the sunrise. Your mother neglected your training. She never showed you the legacy left by your grandmother. Katsuki at this point didn't know what to do. Be enraged at the one before him or frightened at the one before him. So he remained silent with a complicated expression that Naruto had looked back to see. From what you said, there must have been a disagreement between your mom and grandmother, something that must have caused her to not teach you the style. If you were taught it, well, let's say you would have been on a whole other level. Now, this got his attention. Katsuki was now listening more intently. That Naruto took notice, something that caused him to smirk. If you were to learn the water stream rock smashing fist and master it, even I would have to tap into my actual quirk to win. He turns completely to Katsuki, who was just staring at him with wide eyes. Possessing not only a mid-range explosion quirk but also a short-range fighting style would put you on a whole other level to those that are close combat. He begins approaching Katsuki, placing a hand on his shoulder. If you want, during your stay here I can train you personally in combat, to help prepare you in learning your legacy. After all, your mother cannot deny you it. After saying that, Katsuki looks down in thought as he didn't know what to say, which Naruto pulls his hand away and turns around abruptly, confusing the student. Anyways, we can talk later about that another. After all, There was something much more pressing I wanted to discuss with you about. His words got a serious expression from the student, staring intently at Naruto as he wondered what it could be. While you were asleep, you were muttering some stuff at that point. Katsuki's eyes show wide. Who's this round face? He heard a loud slam and turns to find the door was now wide open, which he just blinks before he smirks. Oh, this is gonna be fun. The TV was shut off by the blonde-haired man staring at the screen, thinking of the video recording that had shown a massive lightning storm forming and with it lightning strikes that caused buildings to collapse and explosions to take place that was leading a city to chaos. In the end, he simply closed his eyes. Fools these days. As he muttered that, he leans back into his chair, out his clipboard to overlook the lists of incoming shipments for the animals, food, medications, equipment, etc. Kyushu region. As he spoke again, he rests his left hand against his chin while putting down the clipboard. Is some brat attempting to become a calamity, perhaps? As he asked himself that, his gaze moves onto the window to see it was night now, with the stars being visible before a knock was heard, gaining his attention to see Rumi opening the door wearing her civilian clothes. The kids are in bed. When he heard that, a smile forms on his face as he watched the pro-hero move towards him to get behind him with her arms wrapping around his neck, leaning over him. How has the hothead been? Her tone was laced with amusement. Best Genus couldn't tame that attitude of his or his spiky hair. This got a laugh from the blonde before it turned to bothersome before he glanced at her. From what you know, how would you rate the relationship between Mitsuki and her mother? The question caught her off guard before it turned serious as she lets go, looking away. She was a horrible mother. The cold tone has caught him off guard, gaining his full attention to see she was looking away while rubbing her arm. From what Mitsuki told me, she was an obsessed and abusive bitch of a mother, caring only about the family's legacy. She didn't care for her well-being and thought anything besides training was a waste of time. If not for her pops, she would have been taken out of school and instead homeschooled. The hero moves to lean against the wall with her gaze on the ground, thinking back clearly. The moment she turned 18, she straight up disowned herself and left the family. Her head presses against the wall before looking at the ceiling. They never saw each other again until after Katsuki was born, since her dad wanted to see his newborn grandson, yet upon seeing her Naruto sighs as he got it. Let me guess, knowing Katsuki's attitude came from her, she most likely cussed her out of the hospital. A nod was given as an answer. Cuss it out was an understatement. I was there and had to physically hold Mitsuki back. Damn, she was a handful, yet her expression turned more bothersome. Her mother looked hurt, yet she didn't even try to talk back but turned around and left the busking while Mitsuki was shouting at her while crying. After that, years later, she told me she was convinced by her dad and husband to allow Katsuki to see her under the condition she was with them. They got into arguments every time. Naruto seemed to slouch more in his chair at hearing that. From how she talked, she was more of the aggressor every time she had to see her. When she brought Katsuki, either way, things never got better. Even if she stopped with the abusive attitude, from what I saw and heard, even taking in a more apologetic and nervous approach, most likely after coming to realize how much of a bitch she was, it didn't change the fact she kept bringing up the fact it was her duty to teach Katsuki her legacy, the martial arts. At this point, a hand met his face. To think things have gotten this bad. I should have paid more visits and seen how things were. I could have fixed their relationship. A hand rests on his shoulder, and he looks back at Rumi, who was staring down at him. It's not your fault. You can't be everywhere. Even so, her words didn't make snubbing better as he stood from his seat. Anyways, with the kids also, let's go. He was cut off as Nyan had suddenly appeared at the doorway, gaining their attention. Nyan, what is it? Ah, the doctor's kids causing a problem. At that point, the two just stare at the monster before they look at each other before sighing. So you little brat, is taunting heroes a hobby of yours? Well? Demanded Katsuki, who stood at the ruins, glaring at the older sister known as Mahoro, who was frightened. Like her younger brother, she was a daughter of one of the island's doctors. She was back crawling away from the teen that was glaring at her. Your cheap tricks won't work on me because I'm not like any hero you've met before. You're looking at the next number one. The guy who'll be better than All Might was in his prime. The name's Katsuki Bakugo. His face began to scowl more and more. I'm telling you right now, kid, you picked the wrong person to mess with. Spoke up to the younger brother from behind. Please don't yell at my big sister, sir. Despite this, the kid shakes in fear just at how angry-looking Katsuki looked to them. You were in on it too, weren't? Katsuki was abruptly silenced by the sudden meow being heard. causing the student to feel a chill down his spine before he turns to be met with a barrage of Arnold the Cat's mid-jump that straight up attacked the student, scratching and biting the now pissed student while the two kids were dumbfounded. "WTF is happening? Why are you here, you damn cat?" His demands were answered by the sudden footsteps being heard, bringing their attention towards Naruto, who stood next to Rumi. "That was me." His eyes narrowed a little on the fellow blonde who had stopped resisting the cats that just hang on him, also staring at Naruto while Rumi sighs. His gaze moves onto the siblings. "You two go with Rumi. It's way past your bedtime, so she'll take you home." Not arguing with the man, they both nod, knowing if he's here they caused him trouble, and quickly approach Rumi, who turns her back to them as she led the way, leaving the four of them. "Are you serious?" demanded the hothead who had Arnold jump off him as it combined with all its clones again, yet he didn't care for the cat, those damn brats. In an instant, he was silenced as a fist came barreling into his face due to the other blonde having moved too fast for him to react, much to Izuku's shock as he watched his childhood friend rolling away. "Kaken!" Immediately Izuku turns towards the man who walks past him. "Don't interfere, kid," was the only words he gave to the student of UA, who was shocked yet, even so, was about to do something, crouching to ready himself until he was stopped. "Don't interfere, DKU." Katsuki was already getting back up, knowing he's gonna get one hell of a bruise tomorrow, yet was focused on the man standing before him. The hell was... He was cut off as a single slap graced his face, becoming unresponsive as he was too shocked by what just happened and just turns to meet his cold gaze. "You are a hero in training, you do not terrify children." Naruto places his hands in his pockets. "I've seen more than enough of those faces already, and I refuse to see more because of some child letting his anger get the better of him." His words angered the student, who grits his teeth. "You..." Katsuki catches himself as he stared at the man who wasn't smiling but with a look that told him he had to choose what he said next very carefully before gritting his teeth and looking away. This mere sight caused Naruto's lips to curl upwards. Never frighten children, for heroes must inspire them, not make them fearful. A hand rests on the student. "Besides, what I've told you and taught you, you also need to do is tame that personality of yours if you aim to become the #1 hero." After saying that, he lets go of Katsuki, whose eyes go to his feet. "Can't even enjoy one night with Rumi. Such a pain in the ass," muttered the man, who starts walking away while his back was being stared at by Katsuki, who looks down at his right hand to see it was shaking. Before he formed a fist. While this was happening, Izuku watched in great surprise as he looks between them, and wondered what happened. Flashback years ago on Nabu Island, 1 week after New Year's. Great Pretender OSTR Love, breathes in. With a deep breath came a long sigh of the man who stood in front of a number of gravestones that lay in a graveyard in a sunny day, his gaze focused on a single gravestone that was before him. Hinata Hyuga. As he opened his mouth, he froze and closed it before his gaze meets his feet until they look away. "I haven't visited in a while, you and the others, I mean." His gaze moves back to the gravestone. "I'm sorry. After that day I've always came here to apologize for what I did to you, when in reality I should have apologized for not listening to you that day. Instead I proceeded with what was planned with Garu, Ishiki, and Orochimaru." He proceeds to kneel down in front of the gravestone. "For the past 100 years, I tried once to move on from you, to find love, but it didn't go well. After that I decided it was better to close off my heart rather than give love another shot, as my own punishment for the crimes I committed that day. To never move on but watch and keep the others in check until we all but left this world." His left hand turns to a fist as he takes a small intake of air. "I wanted to tell you that I'm going to try to live again, and it's because of a certain hero." As he spoke, his hand starts to unclench as he spoke with a new look in his eyes. "She in a way saved me up. Till now a day doesn't go by I don't think of what I did to you that day, to everyone. Even so, after all I told her my last, and what she already knew of what I've done, she still accepted me and my sins. So I've decided, despite all I've done, that I'm gonna try to live again." He starts to stand up while staring down at it. "I'm not sure if the others we betrayed that day would even accept what I'm saying. How I'm selfishly trying to live again instead of suffering for the rest of my life for the choices I've made." He moves his right hand to rest on the stone. "Thank you, Hinata, for always being there when I needed you, for loving me. If not for you, who knows what worse things I could have done with the others." As he spoke, he's sliding his hand across it as he pulls away. "With this life, I'm going to live again and to start to love myself as well." With that said, he had pulled his hand away while turning around. "I'll be okay now." As he spoke those final words he began to walk away until he heard something. Even with his sense of hearing it was barely audible. Goodbye, Naruto. Instantly he turns, but what he finds was nothing at all. Upon seeing this sight, a sad smile graces his lips. While turning away to look ahead he saw Rumi leaning against a tree, staring at the squirrels fighting over nuts. Sigh. Goodbye, Hinata, was the last thing he said before he continues walking forwards, towards the pro who was waiting for him before turning to see he was approaching. You get everything off your chest? He question was met with a sad smile that turns cheerful. I think I did. As he said these words, Rumi's eyes widen and looks at him with sympathy at the sight of tears being wiped away before the two start walking away, side by side. My mom's been asking about you. Mind meeting her next month? How about this weekend? Not sure how, but she was able to get my phone number. Wait, what? Your mother is very persistent when it comes to your love life. As they spoke, one ended up being very shocked while the other just laughs. A pair of red eyes were glued on a casing inside the closet that held an old trench coat, black with a red cloud design on it, while next to it was a red kitsune mask with cracks on it. Red Nozomu muttered before his gaze focused on the mask itself. Nozomu. It was with that question a hand fell upon Nozomu's head, which gained his attention to see his father peering over. What have I told you? Not to go into your office by myself. And what did you do? Went into your office by myself. With that small exchange came a sigh from his father, yet he smiles. Where's your sister Suki? This question caused him to look up, appearing to be in thought despite looking more sloth, yet only gets a chuckle from the man who ruffles his son's hair. Most likely out adventuring with Rover. He kneels next to his son. Why not go out by yourself for once? His gaze turned to wonder. Your sister tended to go out adventuring by herself at your age, but you preferred to stay. He stops at seeing Nozomu looking away, becoming uncomfortable. Is something the matter? He stops at seeing his son perk his head up and turn towards one direction on high alert, taking the blonde by surprise. Nozomu. He stopped at the moment, his ears having perked upon a loud explosion being heard from the harbor, and it was followed by more explosions taking place. This merely caused the look on Naruto's face to darken as he frowns with anger forming in his eyes before he stops and feels a hand grasp his own. Looking down he saw the concerned Nozomu looking up at him. There are 4 people. In an instant his eyes shut wide, looking down at his son. What? I don't recognize them, they don't sound or smell familiar. His words merely shock the father that such a thing is possible. Nozomu you. He stops and stared into his son's eyes before he bends down and picks the child up in his arms. Let's go find mommy and your sister. After saying that, his gaze moves to the door to see Nyan and Phoenix. Let the students fight them and only interfere if their lives are truly in danger. That single order have resulted in the 2 left without a word for the enemies. With this, Naruto takes one last look at his old outfit before he shuts the door and moves with his son where his wife and daughter were. It didn't take Naruto long to get at his wife and hand his son over to her so they can head to the shelter before going off on his own, despite her being a pro. The wiser move was letting him deal with the threat. As of now, he had arrived on one of the buildings, allowing him the ability to overlook the city, but more so the battle taking place below, which involved a redhead and 2 blonde students fighting some mummy man using inanimate objects as weapons. Too many openings, muttered the man who had witnessed Katsuki being lifted in the air by the bandages of the villain before he was entirely wrapped by them. Objects wrapped in my bandages move according to my will. I can't affect living things, but your body is covered by much that is inanimate. Your weapons, armor, clothes, they're mine to control. As the mummy spoke, he was using the student to attack the other 2, with the man simply watching in disappointment. What do we even do? Aijiro questions Denki, who stood at his side, both seeing many objects having been raised high into the air, wrapped by bandages, until their attention turns when something came landing behind the 2, who turns to find the man himself, Naruto, standing behind them with his hands in his pockets, clothing consisting of what looks close to his old military uniform of camo. Who the fuck are you? He demands, the man whose gaze just focuses on him. I'm the one in charge of the sanctuary here. If you surrender now and tell me why you're here, I can assure you. He stops upon seeing the controlled Katsuki flew down right towards him, which he jumps back with the other 2 students, avoiding the crater being made from his fist. That dude's controlling him, sir. What are we supposed to do? Yet even when this was asked, Aijiro felt uncomfortable at the presence of Naruto, feeling things will end horribly and not for them. It was then that the bandages shut out, wrapping around him and the other 2. Make your choice, Mummy began. You can give yourself up and willingly become my puppet, or... He froze when something flicked, a black flame suddenly consuming the bandages around him before climbing up towards the villain, who immediately severed it. Watching it fall, much to their shock, yet Mummy was starting to sweat from the presence he began to give off. "I admit defeat now," he shouts, while Naruto just watches as more inanimate objects were wrapped in his bandages, turned into mummy-like creatures with single eyes fixated on him like the ones already wrapped, with the front being Bakugo with his hair sticking out. "Stop," spoke the already struggling student, who surprised the redhead and blonde students, unlike Naruto, who just stared with a passive expression. "Screwing with me." The wrappings expand as an explosion was unleashed that sent the two students flying back, unlike Naruto, who stood his ground and just stared while something began to appear from his tailbone. Meanwhile, the bandages burned off of Bakugo, who stood in a smoke cloud, much to the villain's shock. "Mummy bastard," he grits out, "don't underestimate me." Despite his brave words, he had already received damage, with his right gauntlet having been destroyed. It was at this sight that he drew back his arms to prepare an attack until he froze, a cold chill running down his spine as a pair of hands snaked their way to his head. It was this sight that took the students by surprise, seeing the man had gotten behind the villain in the opening left by Bakugo, and held him in a headlock. "I'll say this once," his hood tightens, "surrender." Despite hearing that warning, a laugh escapes his lips as he made fists that caused the wrapped objects to fly towards his back. Snap! Bakugo's eyes merely widen, along with the other two, as they watched the villain's body collapse, laying on his stomach, yet the head was staring at the sky, wide-eyed. With this, the inanimate objects were released as they fall, causing smaller explosions around Naruto, yet he remained unfazed, unlike the students. Ejiro and Denki were just horrified with Bakugo staring. Despite all the times he shouted death or kill, he had not once intended to truly kill someone but badly hurt them. Oh my! Naruto just looks to see the arrival of the horrified Kyoka and Momo, who saw Naruto snap the villain's neck, and what made it worse was the fact he remained unfazed. It was at this moment both Ejiro and Momo recalled the fear they felt that day crawling back to them. "Why, you killed him," the redhead said as he watched the tail recede, and with the man's gaze fixated on him, yet he just stared back. "I am neither hero nor villain, and I already told you once." His gaze turned cold. "Those who call themselves villains that come to this island in hopes to harm will be dealt with, no matter the number. It will end in just a massacre." He looks down at the body and raises a hand in which a single black flame was lit. Amaterasu, with that mutter, he flicks the flame on the corpse, and immediately it was engulfed in flames of black. The students could say anything as they watched the man walk away without care, while Katsuki swallows before he grits his teeth and turns in the direction where the others are. Not wanting to think too much about the fact Naruto has killed an unimaginable amount of people in the war, having to match the might of nuclear bombs, Naruto said nothing at all as he stared at the unconscious forms of Izuku and Katsuki. "Has been a rough day for the students." It was now nighttime, with the sky covered in clouds where rain fell on the island, and due to the damage, they were evacuated to the smaller island of the two that were connected by a single path. The animals were being kept safe, with the help of Nyan, Phoenix, and the animal whisperer himself, Koji, who had to stay behind so the animals didn't get riled up. Food and water are being passed out to the townspeople. His gaze turns to Rumi at the doorway. Momo has already sent out a distress signal, but so far it may take a day to get immediate help. She walks over to her husband to stand next to him with a serious expression before turning annoyed as she suddenly elbowed him. "How about you and I just deal with these shit villains by ourselves?" She makes a fist and stares at it. "If we work together we can." She stops and shudders upon a sudden gust being blown into her ear, gaining a shiver and a blushing glare towards the smiling Naruto. "This isn't the time, Whiskers." Yet even so he smiles before turning back, concerned. "From what I know, this villain has multiple quirks, which means Hisashi is involved." He crosses his arms just as Rumi also looked concerned. "I don't want you anywhere near him, so instead stay with the kids. I'll have Nyan and Phoenix deal with the other villains while I deal with the brat myself." After saying that, Rumi could see the coldness in his eyes. No matter the time, that never changed while his thoughts drift. Nozomu isn't quirkless. When he said that, Rumi's eyes shot wide, and looks at her husband. "You mean?" Her words gained a nod. "As of right now they're both 7, so it's not that long past the age of 4 for the quirk to manifest, but so far it seems it may be heightened senses surpassing my own in my human state." This got a shocked expression. You mean he's that good? Does that mean when he reaches your age his senses will rival you with your tales? A nod was given to her before looking bothered. Might cause some issues with Suki, she hasn't yet manifested her own. This got a sigh from the mother who scratches her head. This is gonna be a pain. Suki always wanted a quirk while Nozomu didn't care. The two adults just frowned until they heard a knock and looked to see Nozomu opening the door, which surprised them as they watched their son enter with the door closing behind him. Papa, the child stops in front of his parents who were looking down at them, yet they show him gentle expressions. Nozomu, don't worry. We'll make sure. Naruto's words were silenced, turning to utter shock just like Rumi's as their smiles dissolved from a single sentence. Papa, are you gonna kill again? The two said nothing, just silence filled the room as they wondered how he even knew about that before realizing his quirk, yet even that didn't tell him everything. Nozomu, why do you kill? His question caused the words to get stuck in his throat, while his son stared up at him, his red eyes appearing to pierce through him, while he started to sweat. Seeing this, Rumi stepped forward. Sweetheart, why are you? She stops when a hand rested on her shoulder and looked to see he had regained his composure. Nozomu, you already know that answer very well. He walks over towards Nozomu to place a hand on his hand, yet he still looked troubled. Don't give me that look. I do what I do if it means keeping you all safe. He kneels to his son's level. When you get older, you'll understand. He shakes his hand off his head and looks at Naruto tearfully. I don't want Daddy to turn into a monster again. His shout merely caused his eyes to widen momentarily as he saw the tears forming in his eyes. This mere sight caused him to look at his feet. I'm sorry, Nozomu, but I can't. This caused his eyes to widen in shock before he looks away in anger as tears start to fall. He goes to pat his head, but he turns away. Instead of being hurt, he started to smile again. You remind me so much of her. This got his attention, his eyes meeting his own again. Long ago, I knew someone she had the same kind of viewpoint when it came to killing. Ehihei, even so, she joined the military along with me after high school, yet not once as a soldier did she ever kill. The others on our team thought she was stupid for doing such a thing. Even some of us considering getting her relegated, even me. At the time I cared too much for her, and saw she would get herself killed. As he spoke, Rumi stared at her husband with a sad smile. In the end, I was convinced by one of our other teammates who spoke about her wishes, how they showed humanity. Despite being war, she didn't want to kill, and in turn, it made the rest of us feel like maybe there is another way. That was until I went against it, and caused an even worse situation that caused so much death. He looks his son in the eye. I don't intend to stop how I am, for I am willing to do anything for you, your sister, and your mother. As he spoke, Nozomu was about to turn away. Susu, how about surpassing me and putting me back on my ass? This caused his son to look at his father in shock, just like Rumi. If you were to surpass me and take my place, that would mean I wouldn't need to do anything anymore, instead of leaving it all up to you. A finger pokes his chest. But to surpass me is a path that won't be even remotely. His son grabs his finger, gripping it with a large of determination in his eyes. I'll do it! He shouts abruptly, his hardened gaze meeting his own. I'll get stronger so Daddy doesn't have to kill, because that means Daddy will be sad again. As he shouted that, Rumi's eyes widened all the way. Sad again? She looks to see the shocked expression on Naruto's face, his eyes equally wide until something started to change. This sight shocked her, as being the few times he cried as he just closed his eyes with the tears increasing, having trouble controlling himself. Daddy, are you? He stopped with a hand resting on his head before the crying Naruto smiles. Thank you, Nozomu. He began to ruffle his hair. I can't tell you just how grateful I am to hear those words, to finally know that after all these years I can finally give it a rest. As the tears stopped, what he showed his son was a peaceful smile but tired eyes. I won't let you down. With those words he runs out of the room, leaving the two with the unconscious students. Naruto, are you? She stops to see him standing up. I have faith in my son, as you should too. He turns to looks at her with a smile. We have such great kids. Those words caused her to blush and look away, a smile forming on her face. You're damn right we do, she responds while meeting his gaze once again. Katsuma Shimano, muttered the father who stood against the wall, arms crossed and outside the building, with the storm having ended, with a bandaged Katsuki standing on his left, staring at him. Yeah, the asshole villains are after the brat with the cell quirk. As he relays this to the man, he watched him place a hand on his chin. From what you also told me he collapsed, so there's a limit. He turns fully to Katsuki. Bakugo, he called, which caused him to straighten. I'll give you and Midoriya one more chance to kick that villain's ass, so I'll stay back and watch. However, if you fail there will be a penalty. A toothy grin forms on his face, causing Katsuki's eyes to narrow. Fine, but if I win, he points at Naruto, train me even after we have to leave. This merely got a smile. Okay, but if you lose, the grin widened, I get to have a chat with round face. This got a reaction as Katsuki blushes before glaring at the man. You wanna die, you whiskered bastard? Please shout, alert everyone to outside so they'll check what's happening. His words caused almost got another shout until a voice from behind was heard. Is everything okay? This question caused him to jolt, and slowly turns to find Ochako standing behind him with Tsuyu, having been closest to the door. And mind your own damn business. Despite how rude he was, the two girls stared at him. Did you stutter? Shut it round face. You did stutter. As this whole scene was playing out, Naruto was smiling against the wall before sighing and looking at the sky. How long has it been since I thought of placing my trust in another? The battle was on upon sunrise, with the villains being split apart into separate areas, with one such being Mina and Fumikage that fought in a cave, and was losing gradually. Oh please! The villain known as Karuka said, her hair blades clashing with that of a shadow and steel blades, yet, even so, it wasn't enough. Mina! Fumikage could only shout as Dark Shadow headed right towards her, but even he realized it wouldn't make it, watching as the hardened and sharpened blade-like hair flew through the air towards the wide-eyed Mina, her eyes widening. It was then that something surprising got in its way, and that being one goofy-looking bird, Phoenix, who got in front of her and took on the blades that stabbed into its body, much to their shock at it moving so fast. Phoenix? Mina and Fumikage muttered in clear shock at one of the guards of the island who have arrived at the scene, but, oh no! Mina became tearful at seeing the blood leaking from the many wounds on its body, yet it didn't even react to it but stared at Karuka, who at this point was just smiling at the bird thing in front of her. I am Phoenix, he suddenly declared, flapping his large wings. Begone, you foul wench. The moment Karuka heard that last part, a tick mark formed on her forehead, while the two just stare in shock at what he just called the villain just as it charges forward. Bikata! He was abruptly silenced by the many hair-like blades stabbing into it, splattering blood everywhere, much to the horror of the students who watched the gruesome scene as the bird hits the ground, unmoving, with Karuka approaching it and kicking it in the face. Damn bird! She gritted out before looking up at the two. No more games, I'm killing you too quickly. As she spoke, her hairs harden once again as she approaches the two, while Fumikage prepares himself, unlike the shaking Mina until it happened. Ouch! It was with the new, deep voice came a light from behind that caused Karuka to turn just as came to a halt. In the seconds that followed, a trail of blood began to leak from her mouth, which she looks down to find an arm through her chest before back up again to be greeted by the sight. Before he stood a transformed phoenix. He appeared to be now a humanoid bird with its body looking like armor rather than skin and feathers. He gained an extra pair of wings, armor-like scales across his body, and a large avian eye in the center of his chest. Why you gotta go and do that? I don't like getting serious. As he spoke those words, he pulled his left arm out of her chest to allow her corpse to fall at his feet, with a puddle of blood soon to follow, yet it didn't change the fact the two were more horrified than grateful, which he noticed. Geez, I save your lives and all I get is shock. Silence. Phoenix sighs as he turns away. Welp, best see what's happening. Todoroki was among the group of heroes in training, trying his hardest not to vomit, unlike the others who had. Before them lay the corpse of Chojuro, who had his lower jaw ripped off after having the jaw forcefully widened to the point it was gory. Nyan simply sat on the corpse, happily smiling while covered in the blood of his foes. Boring, he spoke while tossing the lower jaw repeatedly in the air, splattering more blood on him. And I thought he would be a challenge. The cat monster just turns in the direction of multiple explosions taking place, followed by what looked like blue dragons flying through the air. Damn it! Spoke Nine, who was in an incredible amount of internal pain, clutching his chest. Not now! Yet regardless, all the obstacles he saw had been removed, with his gaze moving towards the fearful children who were tearful, yet even so Mahoro stood in front of her brother, protectively. Run, Katsuma! She ordered her frightened brother. No, don't, Mahoro! His pleas were ignored by his sister, who charges forwards and stops in front of the villain, shouting and begging him to stay away from her brother. Just stop. Immediately she was silenced by the man grabbing her by the throat, lifting her on the air at his side just as the cells in his body scream in pain. Once again flinching, which the grip tightens around Mahoro's throat. Katsuma, her little brother, was shaking in fear as he watched his helpless sister held hostage. Unless you want your sister to die right now, Huff, you'll get over here, he orders through gritted teeth, much to the terror of the tearful brother. No, run away! His sister spoke tearfully to her brother before the grip tightens to silence her. Meanwhile the purple glowing veins increase in Nyan's face painfully. Help me turn my desire into reality. In his left hand, the kid had begun to lose consciousness before in one quick movement he burst out into a full spirit, regardless of his own life. No! I can't just give up. I promise I will protect you, Mahoro, he screamed while Nyan throws the girl away only for a foot to slam into his face in return. Courtesy of one smiling pro who sent the man flying back, while in her left arm was the younger sister being wide-eyed as she stared at the dust cloud. Why you? He was cut off by Rumi picking him up in her other arm. No time to chat. She ducks under a beam and starts running in the opposite direction just as the clouds disperses to reveal the enraged Nyan, staring at her retreating form before raising both arms until he felt it. Boy, the booming voice from behind had immediately caused Nyan to turn, planning on blowing whoever it was away until he was overcome by this massive killing intent that stunned him just as his right wrist was grabbed tightly and pulled, having an elbow slam into his chest where multiple cracks could be heard. Nyan was cut off. Even after spitting out blood, the sound of his yell was silenced as the attack didn't stop. His wrist was gripped even tighter, as it was completely crushed while he was pulled again in his moment of weakness to have a fist slam in his face, cracking his skull while sending him flying back with the mask breaking off. What? He finally managed out to look, yet no one was there until he heard something from behind, only for a pair of arms to wrap around him, and with that he was brought into a devastating suplex that formed a crater at the same time, having pain course through Nyan's body. ARGH. Once again words were silenced as the foe got up before slamming a foot in his stomach, knocking the air out of him, as that once more sent him flying before getting his head caught and slammed into the ground. With this, Nyan was just wide-eyed as he moved his gaze towards the one who held his head to find a pissed-off blonde holding him, while two foxtails were seen swishing behind him. Damn brat! At that point he let go and stood up. This choice allowed Nyan to regain his composure as he too did the same, standing up to find the man cracking his knuckles. Nyan was already moving, but just as he brought back his left arm he was abruptly silenced. Unlike anyone before, he moved too fast nor allowed him to finish speaking due to a backhand fist slamming into his face, shooting out an already loose tooth from his mouth, yet it didn't stop the villain who crouched as he fired 5 beams from his left hand. Fingertips due to the right has had its wrist crushed. Yet the blonde moved too fast, dodging all of the beams with only his jacket being singed before launching himself towards the man, but his fist met a barrier. This moment had Nyan already prepared his next attack until he felt something and looks down to see one of the tails wrapping around his leg before abruptly he was pulled and thrown around like a rag doll into the earth. How? He thought after the 7th time he was thrown into the ground, which sent debris flying, and Naruto just staring down at him. At this point, Rumi was watching next to the shocked Izuku and Katsuki, who were watching this scene. Wait, I don't think he was told about what type of quirks he was using? Izuku muttered, his eyes widening in the realization of the level of skill this man held, while Katsuki kept his arms crossed, watching closely as the villain unleashed 2 large blue dragon-shaped monster tendrils towards the man, who tore through them, spinning while his hands seemed to give off an aura that was sent out to slash the tendrils before he lands on his feet, charging again. Shit! Nyan quickly made a larger barrier with his one hand, but became in disbelief upon Naruto suddenly shifting his center of gravity behind human capability, as he suddenly turned right then around the barrier mid-dash. Yet even so, Nyan was already turning with his arm extended as he fired the beams right for the man, who sidesteps at the moment right before impact, causing Nyan to not understand if it hit or not as he watches Naruto closing in on him. Get away from me! As he shouted that, his one arm created an even larger barrier in front of Naruto, who was heading right for it, but this time he draws back his right arm, and with it, a third tail emerges as he threw a punch that shatters the barrier, much to the shock of Nyan, who was nailed once more in the face and sent flying back, rolling as he comes down till he stops. It was at this point all the students had arrived to witness the beatdown, gathering where Rumi was with the others. The kids having been handed over to Phoenix and Nyan, who make their way back towards the cage where Koji was, and in turn gaining the notice from Nyan, who was staring at the sky to see it. No, as he spoke, Naruto was walking towards him with an angered expression. I can't lose, as he muttered that. It was then that Naruto saw the sky, a cumulonimbus cloud forming above his head, much to his surprise. I can't stop now. As Nyan spoke, the cumulonimbus cloud grew massively even more. I won't let it end like this. I will have my new society. No matter what it takes. And with that, Nyan's body unleashed even more power, much to the annoyance of Naruto, who looked back to feel the power increase. The villain had clear energy pouring out of his back while displaying purple glowing lines that he noticed. Is he at his limit? Thought the man before his gaze focused on the empty tubes on his back, which caused his eyes to narrow before the villain spun fast, forming a vortex of wind that was followed by two others before combining into one massive energy twister that took him by surprise as he grits his teeth. This isn't good. His gaze turns to the lighting crashing down around the island, more so causing few explosions upon striking the cage, much to his worry. Shit. He stops when it converged on him, having sped straight for him, which he charged and slammed his right fist, but it was useless as he was drawn into it, much to the shock and worry of the students. They watched the man being tossed in the air with shots of lightning hitting him until he saw something, which he was blasted out of it and into the ground. Damn, muttered the man, who had very noticeable wounds healing already, while Nyan lands in front of him. Nyan was glaring down upon the man, who was glaring up at him, watching as he acted high and mighty. It's no use, you simply don't have enough strength to defeat me. He begins approaching the blonde, who got in a fighting stance. You would not survive the new world, I will. Nyan stops when he heard a snort, then met a smile. Oh God, why you believe? He was cut off by a beam striking his body and blowing a hole in it. Silence, you insignificant worm. The strong will lord over the weak in my utopia. Immediately a massive tendril of the blue dragon flew out from the villain and struck Naruto, who was trapped in its mouth, as he flew through the air before crashing behind Nyan with a large expositor of debris flying everywhere. Labels like hero and villain won't be needed. Power will be the only factor that matters. That's how a true superhuman society should be structured. At this point, Izuku was gritting his from where he stood next to Katsuki, who was also standing back reluctantly, while Mahoro and Katsuma could only watch as the man they've known since they were kids was being beaten. Yet the only one who watched without showing fear was Rumi, and she wasn't smiling. Asshole! The shout caused Nyan to stop and towards the dust cloud, seeing the blonde was stuck between the creation's teeth, and stare at him from where he lay. You must be a complete dumbass if you think that's even remotely possible in your standing. At that point, he saw something and looks at the sky to see massive amounts of lightning focusing on one point, much to his shock. If you attempt to get in my way, he raises both hands as the lighting increases from above, then die. With those words, a single beam like lightning was unleashed right down towards Naruto, who stared at it wide-eyed as it came down, but as it did so his gaze moves in the span between it coming down and striking. To look at Rumi, what he saw was his wife. Not even showing fear nor happiness, the look in her eyes told all, and that was complete faith. Despite the situation, that was the only laugh that escaped his lips as the attack hits him, and with it, a massive explosion was followed by a shockwave. Mr. Uzumaki! The students screamed in horror, while Izuku and Katsuki were just shocked as the two were about to head out the moment the attack finished, only for a pair of hands to grab their shoulders and gain their attention towards the wife who watched. Why are you stopping us? Are you blind? Their shouts did nothing but made them realize something. Rumi wasn't smiling but stared calmly at the massive dust cloud before closing her eyes. Long ago, I accepted you, Naruto. As she muttered those words, the students were confused before she opens them again. Don't change who you are because of me, just protect this island and our family. As she spoke those words, Izuku and Katsuki felt it, all the students felt it. Izuku was now shaking, standing in front of the rest, who all but collapsed to their knees as they bore witness to that of a calamity. Katsuki fell to one knee as he too felt it, true, unadulterated malice, that of which Izuku fell to his knees as he wasn't prepared for such a feeling. Rumi was the only one who stood, despite her knees also buckling from the intense aura, before looking back at the terrified students. This is what it means to be in the presence of a calamity who no longer playing around. As she muttered that, she watched her husband for the first time having entered that form before her presence. Nyan just stood there, feet glued to the earth as he couldn't comprehend the feeling behind him, but the simple fact the words he spouted out now felt pointless. What Nine could only turn around slowly with completely wide eyes filled with fear, for what he saw was the image of a massive nine-tailed fox. At this point, something was shot up high into the air, drawing his and everyone's attention, who caught the glimpse of a white orb of light that was sent towards the sky before being blinded by a single detonation of such magnitude it caused a shockwave all over the island. With the students bending down on high alert, all were given witness to a massive orb-like explosion that blew all the clouds away, revealing a sunny day. Wjhat. He was silenced by the sound of clear, heavy footsteps from the large smoke cloud before him, still steaming. Each step echoed as it got closer and closer. Each step resulted in Nine's fear increasing. Each step gave way to something that can only be labeled as a calamity upon the figure walking out of the smoke. His appearance for all to see, and it was with this he came to realize his mistake. "Dear God, no wait, there can only be one explanation," was all Nine could mutter in terror, for what lay before him was a transformed Naruto. Finally realizing he was in the presence of one of the monsters that matched nations' military might in the war 100 years ago, the man had truly taken on a different form. His hair had grown to the point the back of his hair had reaches his waist. The markings on his face had become thicker to resemble the trigram. His pupil to his already red eyes now as another slit in the center, horizontal to it and forming a. His canines had grown to show 4 gangs protruding from his mouth. "Been a while since I took this form," several cracks were heard as he stretches. The clothing he bore was changed, as with his destroyed doctor coat now taking a different form, as it was replaced by a dark red, nearly black layer of aura in the shape of a full-length haori that had the sleeves stop at his elbow, red veins running across his arms as his fingernails turned to claws. The most notable detail wasn't the fact he now had 6 tails, but on his back was the skeleton of a 6-tailed fox, the head laying on his right shoulder while the body on his back and the tails upon each of his tails. With this form, the grass grew and any plant life grew as well near him. Despite his maliciousness, it brought nature energy. In a single movement, he was already in front of Nine, who couldn't even see him move, appearing as if he were a red flash. "What you've done calls for punishment, and you do realize what that means." Wwai. He was silenced, not by a punch, kick, or slash, but a single, brutal swing of a tail that blew off his head, splattering blood everywhere with his gray matter, bone, and the piece of an eye. This scene gained shock from the students who watched him and that man in just a tail swing. All Naruto did was look down in disappointment as the corpse fell in its increasing puddle of blood. "Tch" was the only sound he made while his body gave off steam, returning to normal with the tails receding before he looks back at his wife and students, showing a thumbs up at the group. "Sigh, well, that was something," muttered the man, who finally sat his ass down on a couple of boulders, watching as the helicopters came with pros, helping the injured heroes and looking over the damage which Naruto had front row seats to, watching as military personnel was helping the injured students to the hospitals thanks to the help of doctors and surgeons that were brought along. Naruto's gaze moves down to the pro-hero Hawks, who was staring up at him, the two locking gazes before the pro broke it, and moves on to the students. It was then he froze as he smelled something and his ears twitched. Due to the fact he just entered his stronger form, his senses were still very fresh, and with it he could smell someone after hearing a particular sound, coming from the field of flowers on the main island. Male, he smells like Nana yet. His eyes widen all the way, abruptly standing up and about to activate his tails till he flinched, having the side effects kick in from going 3 to 6 tails immediately rather than 1 by 1, but it didn't matter in the end, as that smell had disappeared after he heard that sound again, which he could only presume was teleportation. Nana, as he muttered that, his left hand turned into a fist. "Thank you for your hospitality, sir," Tenya shouted, giving a bow to the man in charge, who stood next to his wife and the 4 kids, his and the ones saved by Izuku and Katsuki. "We appreciate everything you did for us during our stay in your care." Naruto merely smiles as he looks over the students of Class 1A. Despite everything, the students still appeared uncomfortable in his presence, which he took note of and frowns. "I have something to say before you depart." He turns to look at Rumi and gave her a look which she understood, and lead the children away as they gave their goodbyes, leaving him with the students. "You all know who I am and my story." He looks back at them to see their faces. Back then, it was a time of ruin, despair, death. There was no room for heroes but only soldiers. We had to make the choices no one else could, me and a few others in my unit, found a choice lying before us, and to take that choice, we turned against our own for what we believed in. You could also say we blinded ourselves, focusing on the fastest way to end the war rather than what could truly work. Naruto stared at each of the students, one by one. Among everything I told you, remember what I say next and take it to heart from someone who's walked that path of death. And that is, be better than me, be a hero and not a soldier. With that said, he shows a smile to help them relax. After all, each one of you can be a great heroes. With those parting words, he watched as each student, one by one, walked up the ramp of the ship till Katsuki was left to meet his gaze. You lost. Shut it. At this point, Katsuki was looking embarrassed with his eyes meeting his feet. In order for me to help train you, I'll swing by your house this week to talk to your mother to convince her to train you. Immediately his eyes widen and look up. You can come to my island during the weekends for training sessions, but for you to learn your legacy at a much faster rate, you wouldn't be able to attend your classes anymore in person. This caused his eyes to widen in shock. Katsuki stops and thinks with a frown, which Naruto smiles before looking back to see his family waiting and signals them to come back over, with the 2 other kids as well. Just think about it. You can still train with your mother and do classes, but if you want to reach a far greater level in a shorter amount of time, then my offer is the best. After saying that, he watches Katsuki walking up the steps where the others were standing. In the distance they were. The students couldn't hear what was said. Oh yes, Ochako, Naruto suddenly called, causing Katsuki's eyes to bulge as he recalls the bet and turns fast towards the man. You trained under Gunhead, right? This caused her eyes to widen in surprise. How do you know about that? I read your file. He's a martial artist, so that got me thinking. If you want to get stronger in hand-to-hand, I can set up a training schedule for you to come to this island during weekends to learn under me. As he said that, Katsuki was shocked before looking at Ochako, who was unsure. You won't be the only one. A devilish grin takes form. Katsuki is already going to be training with me every weekend starting now, so having you 2 also train against each other would work out as well. As he finished speaking, Ochako puts on a thoughtful expression, while Katsuki turns to Naruto in anger with a blush, yet the man who was smiling at him devilishly. The students didn't understand what exactly was going on by much, but a few did. One being Mina, who was the first to realize what was happening but didn't bother to say anything at all. I'll think about it. Is there a way to contact you? I don't like giving out my private phone number, so just use Katsuki's phone to call me. With that said, she looks at Katsuki, who was avoiding her gaze at being dragged into such a situation by the man. In the end, the ship began to depart with the family standing as they watched the ship leaving, while the 2 kids that were saved by the heroes in training were running along the dock to say their goodbyes. Rumi couldn't help but look at Naruto, who watched as they left, but instead of a smile, it was replaced with a deep frown. Nana, there might have been a high chance she was pregnant with our child. Rumi could only stare at her husband, knowing he's chosen that. Whether or not if it's true though, as of now he'll have to research Nana to know if she had a child and what happened after. At this point, he felt something and turns to see Rumi leaning into him, which surprised him before he smiles before holding her close. Yet even so, he still thought, if he's a danger to my family, regardless if he's my son or grandson, I'll kill him myself. Nothing was said as one blonde-haired man stood, staring at a new house being constructed finally after what had happened to the previous 1 year ago. He stood on the sidewalk, seeing the machinery unmanned, showing they were off for the day. We must not have a repeat of what happened in Daika City. As he heard this, he glances at his phone that was on the news involving what happened a couple of weeks ago that took place before Nine's attack. It's been 9 days since that fateful incident when a riot of only 20 people destroyed the city in less than an hour. To blame. Villains hoping to lower the public's view on heroes through destruction and the loss of innocent life. It's foolish to blame Hero for what happened in Daika City. In my opinion, the whole system needs to be reformed. Don't hate all the heroes for doing their best. It's not like they have office gigs. At this moment, he turns off his phone. It's becoming obvious that society is reaching its breaking point as it did over 100 years ago. A hand runs through his hair. Whatever Shigaraki is planning, it would be better we just remove him entirely. That's why I want your support in. He was cut off by a calm tone. Denied. This immediately caused Naruto to frown as he looks at the man who had his eyes closed before opening them to reveal large black eyes. We all agreed over 50 years ago we would begin to search for our successors. Don't forget. All for One isn't a calamity like us. He can't do anything against you or he will die, and you still must abide by the rules. that means not getting involved in whatever he does unless it impacts you and not you seeking altercation. His gaze moves on to Naruto from the house. As the rules dictate over 100 years ago, we four can no longer get involved after the sins we've made during the war but help society in ways that don't reveal who we are. It was decided we would stay on guard and prepare in case that thing makes its return to our dimension. His words just caused Naruto to grit his teeth and turn to him. Ishi, Jigen, he corrects himself upon seeing his gaze harden. As the rules dictate, this involves me. Like the attack on the island, I can get involved since my grandson is being brought into this. Not to mention whatever. He stops yet again when he saw the dissatisfied look on his face. It doesn't matter, he was not under your protection at all and was taken in by All for One. He starts turning away. Unless All for One openly tries to attack you or he tries something against your wife or kids, you cannot interfere with his business. Don't forget, we know some of the things you've done, such as getting involved with UA, wanting to take on students. The only reason you can do it is because it's not directly impacting this era and because we allow it. Garu doesn't mind at all you tutoring his descendant. Naruto could only grit his teeth as he was gone, leaving him by himself, which he just looks at the house before down at a photo. A picture of Nana Shimura who was hugging a child smiling cheerfully. If only she told me, I would have been able to prevent the misfortune from falling on this family. My, as he mutters that to himself, he pockets the photo before his gaze moves towards the sky. Seeing snowfall has begun, yet his phone vibrates, gaining his attention as he takes it out. I've prepared as you've asked. The work studies program will allow those 2 students to work under you on Nabu Island. Upon reading it, he sighs in realization of what he should next do. Today seems like the best time to get Bakugo and bring him with me to see his mother before Christmas tomorrow. He places a hand on his chin, knowing this clone was given a certain amount of energy before it would end. I said no. Bakugo all but shouted at the lovable pink Ashido who's been trying to sneak Santa clothing on the hothead. What, I'm just chilling here. Yet that was not even believable. You going back to Genus, Bakugo? His question gained his annoyed glare just as Kaminari threw a hat on him quickly, yet instead of anger he stopped, recalling the hero was still missing. Bakugo is already going to be training with me every weekend starting now, so having you 2 also train against each other would work out as well. Recalling the man's words, he frowns as he hasn't decided on leaving school to become his full-time student or just train weekends there. The internship only will put an issue on that. It was at this point they heard loud knocking at the door, gaining the students of Class 1A's attention, with Uraraka being the one to walk towards the door and open it, which her eyes widen in surprise. Yo! Spoke the smiling Naruto, who stood at the door, giving a wave to the surprised class as the door fully opens with Naruto entering, past Uraraka. If you want to get stronger hand-to-hand, I can set up a training schedule for you to come to this island during weekends to learn under me. The student stares at Naruto's back, at the Calamity's back, who offered to train her in combat, while one speedster immediately spoke after getting in front of him. And Mr. Uzumaki? Tenya said, or rather shouted, as he abruptly got to him. Other students equally shocked at seeing the man in front of them having come to their school after the incident at Nabu Island. I would have been home, but today was the closest day I could schedule a meeting in the city with an old friend, though I would drop by and grab Bakugo. This caused the students' eyes to widen, with them looking at the hothead himself, who seemed surprised. You need Bakugo for something? Kirishima questions the man, who simply nods. Yes, I need to grab him for a little while, for it involves the upcoming work studies with me. He glances at Uraraka and smiles, causing her eyes to widen as she too remembers while the hothead was shocked at the fact he can do the work studies with Naruto before recalling he knew the principal. In the end, he just walks over to him with an annoyed expression. Let's just get this over with. Naruto just smirks before he noticed Izuku walking up to him. Excuse me, Mr. Uzumaki, He was cut off by Naruto raising a hand. The answer is no. This caught him and many others by surprise, with Bakugo's eyes widening as well. I won't take you on for the upcoming work studies. I never had any intention to, since you just don't interest me, along with personal reasons. This caught them all by surprise, with Kaminari muttering harsh, with Uraraka being surprised she caught him interest. Besides, it's best you just train with all might. His gaze held an answer to his own thoughts. The fact he knew more about One for All, yet instead of talking more about that, the man brought out his phone. Also, mind explaining this? His question immediately got a reaction as a number of students turned away, trying not to laugh while Bakugo's eye twitches at seeing a certain interview playing, which that included him and Todoroki, yet the hothead was cut out, instead only showing glimpses of himself looking pissed off before Shiro and Kaminari started to laugh again with Bakugo just gritting his teeth, still salty about that. You got to get a handle on that anger of yours. The student glared at the man who puts his phone away while Ishido sneaks up on the student. You touch me and you die. Oh come on, it's Christmas. It was at this point, the door opens abruptly, gaining everyone's attention. You started the party already? Came the question of the teacher of Class 1A, Aizawa, who was taken aback by the sight of Naruto giving him a wave. Need to borrow one of your students in a little. He stops talking when he notices another entering. A child with pale blue-gray hair wearing a Santa outfit, looking happy, yet Naruto just stares at her. I'm supposed to say. She looks at the teacher, trick or treat? Her question got an immediate response from the man who kneels, correcting her. Airy claws. One by one, Naruto noticed students approach the girl happily at how cute she looked at being a little Santa. In sickness and in health, she proceeds to throw glitter with Naruto raising an eyebrow. No, you're even further away. Is Toga coming? That guy's a riot. Kirishima questioned their teacher, yet was only told he had his class to celebrate with. Enjoy yourself. Aizawa smiles at the kid. Go on. With that said, she approaches Uraraka with Naruto just backing away, but hears everything. Despite being a clone, he possessed all the OG's senses. Her horn's gotten bigger. Yeah, her attitude has remained positive. She's taking what you said to heart. Naruto just glances at Izuku, who looked overjoyed at seeing the child enjoying herself. Wonder what I missed? As he thought that, his gaze turns to Aizawa, who approached him and stood on his right while the students enjoyed themselves. Naruto mouthing to Bakugo the time he had before they visited his parents, and soon enough it was a full-blown party again with the students. As he watched, he could see the noticeable attraction between Uraraka and Izuku before his gaze moves on to Bakugo, who was glancing at the two before looking away in great annoyance at Mina once again throwing a Santa hat on his head. Stop that! Oh, lighten up already! The blonde couldn't help but smile at this scene. What it was like in high school. Hello. When he heard that, he turned his gaze down to the child who was looking up at him before extending a candy cane. Merry Christmas. The moment he heard that, his eyes widened in surprise before a gentle smile formed on his face, and kneels to take the cane. Merry Christmas. He places a hand atop her head. Airy. She just blinks in surprise and smiles at the man who stands back up. You forgetting anything? The clone questions the student who got done putting on the jacket since it started to snow. Let's just get this over with, he told the Calamity, who just smiles as he begins opening up the door before he heard his name being called. Mr. Uzumaki. This got his attention with the hothead, both turning to see Uraraka standing behind them with the smile gone, putting on an expression that wanted answers. I thought it over, and before I give my answer, why do you want to train me? This caused Bakugo's eyes to widen, realizing it's most likely because of him, yet he came to a new realization upon seeing the expression the man next to him had turned to regret. To put it simply, your great-grandmother was a part of my unit in the past. At that point, her eyes shot wide and watched as he avoided her gaze, seeing the emotion his eyes now held. Back then, it was a time of ruin, despair, death. There was no room for heroes but only soldiers. We had to make the choices no one else could. Me and a few others in my unit found a choice lying before us, and to take that choice, we turned against our own for what we believed in. She stops and looks back at the others smiling and laughing, then at Izuku, who caught her gaze before she turns away and meets his eyes. Would like to take your offer. I want to do my work studies on Naba Island. This caused Bakugo's eyes to widen, with Naruto doing the same, yet he just stares into her eyes. The gaze of someone seeking strength, yet she didn't know she looked like a mirror image with her great-grandmother, just having shorter hair and a darker shade of brown hair. I see. I'll call the school to let them know, as well as I would need to inform your parents. But be prepared, my training won't be easy, and we won't just be working on combat, but also your quirk. The last part had surprised her, and watched as he turns his back to her, walking out with Bakugo following behind. So, the student began, what did you guys do to your old unit, the ones you turned against? His question met no answer, as all he saw was the back of the man's head until he finally came to a stop and stared at the night sky, the snow starting to fall. We killed them. Bakugo's eyes widened and words got stuck in his throat as Naruto turned back, his eyes glowing red. I killed the woman I loved who tried to stop me after I took a particular serum. After that, the others went on the attack to stop us, yet we didn't have time, so the others killed them. Garu, he was best friends with Uraraka's great-grandmother, and he was the one to kill her. As he spoke, Bakugo's eyes widen while the man stares at the sky. Flashback, over 100 years ago. I am Private Shigaraki. A man all but shouted. He possessed short white hair and luminous red eyes that lay behind glasses. He was dressed in military clothing of a private and stood in front of a large tent within a military base, yet as seconds turn to minutes. The man starts to sweat until he jolts from something flying by him, freezing as a loud crash was heard, and he turns slowly to be met with the sight of a man laying on a destroyed wooden table that came flying out with the man. Slowly, the downed man looks up with a shit-eating grin to display his long silver hair that spikes upward in two large prongs, looking like AV with his yellow eyes fixated on another. Nice one. Damn it, Garu, why you gotta do that to my ramen? He was innocent. Shigaraki just turns now, sweating, to find a guy, appearing to be a few years older than him, holding a broken cup in one hand. What he took notice of was that both men were dressed in a camo shirt and jeans, with the new guy sporting short red hair and ocean blue eyes with slotted pupils. Now, he stops with his gaze meeting Shigaraki. Who the fuck are you? His question seems to cause his eyes to widen. Private Shigaraki, he answers immediately. The higher-ups have assigned me to your unit. His question gained a surprising look on his face just as the other guy did as he stood up and walked over to Naruto, leaning to him. When was it decided we get fresh meat? He never got that answer as a slap upside Naruto and Garu's head came, gaining an ow from them both as the two turns to find others behind them, exiting the tent led by one tall man who stood taller than Naruto. Possessing a more muscular build than Naruto and Garu, he possessed spiky black hair with gray at the sides and a slight beard. His eyes were concealed but the shades he wore, and has a scar running across his face between his eyes. So you're the recruit. He sported a smile in front of the others behind him. I am Masashi, but I prefer you to call me by my code name, even off missions. Blast. He points at Naruto and Garu, who are looking at him, still annoyed by the hard slap. The redhead's Naruto, code name Kurama, and the other is Garu, codename Hunter. Blast just smiles as he extends a hand towards the others, yet their appearances varied, with one being a literal robot. Shikamura, codename Shadow. A yawn was gained by the pineapple-haired man who didn't care. Kagami, codename Red Ice. The man with 3 tomos in his red eyes gave a wave with a friendly wave. Hiyori, codename Burden, spoke to a smiling, round-faced girl who stood with her arms crossed with long brown hair at her shoulders. Drive, codename Drive. That merely got a sweat drop from the private as the lack of emotion with its single red eye glowing in response. Hinata, codename Clear. She gives him a gentle smile, surprising the private as he watched her walk past him to join Naruto's side, which he just smiles. Orochimaru, codename Snake. It was with that introduction from Blast again that the group realized that Snake was not among them, causing the leader to sigh as he pinched the bridge of his nose. Why does he always do that? Mutters the oldest. Can't he just stick around instead of doing who knows what with the government? It was after saying that they heard footsteps and turned to find an annoyed and very pale-skinned man being held by the back of his shirt, courtesy of a calm-looking man. Thank you, Ishiki. He turns to Shigaraki. The pale-skinned man is Orochimaru. His words just gained an annoyed look from the man who had shoulder-length black hair, golden eyes with slitted pupils, purple markings around his eyes, and fawn-like teeth. His gaze seemed to pierce through Shigaraki, yet the leader paid it no mind. Introducing the last one, Ishiki, codename Jigen. A single nod was given as Blast looks at Shigaraki. Welcome to your first day a part of the military unit, Omagatoki. Blast smiles brightly at Shigaraki, who looks surprised but smiles at the group. I am Private Hisashi Shigaraki. The man introduced himself as the memory all but fades. At the prison known as Tartarus. It was at this point AFO began to stir, and if he could, he would have opened his eyes. Slowly he starts to smile, which caused all the guns on the walls to point at him. Relax, I'm just having nostalgia from a dream. He looks up at the ceiling, recalling the past when I was considered normal. As he spoke, the memory of the team was changed to that of a bloody memory of 4 individuals walking in front of him, transformed into beasts, into calamities that were about to enter a war.